At a Funeral for Valentia Majumbozi, who died shortly after qualifying as a doctor, by Dennis Brutus. Black, green, and gold at sunset, pageantry, and stubbled graves expectant of eternity. In brides' white, nuns' white veils, the nurses gush their bounty of red wine cloaks, frothing the bugle-dirging slopes. Salute! Then ponder all this hollow panoply, for one whose gifts the mud devours with our hopes. Oh, all you frustrate ones, powers tombed in dirt, aborted not by death, but carrion books of birth. Arise, the brassy shout of freedom stirs our earth. Not death, but death's head tyranny scythes our ground, and plots our narrow cells of pain, defeat, and dearth. Better that we should die than that we should lie down. So, there's a lot going on the image. If you have a look, there's quite a bit happening on the poem itself. I'll go through the definitions and then explain what's happening, particularly between the black and the dark green colors. So pageantry is a ceremonial display to put on a show. If you imagine a beauty pageant, a Miss World, a Miss Universe, anything along that line, it's a big display. It is a show. In some aspects, there is also a type of celebration. These are supposed to be women and men representing countries and continents. Then we've got stubbled graves. So stubbled is leftover crop stalks. So once the harvesting has been done, most of the tall parts of the crops have been taken down, the millies, etc., being removed, and you've got just the little bits that are left over sticking up out of the ground. Day-old beard after shaving, so not quite a full beard, but again, if a bit rough, sandpapery. Then we've got number 3, gush is to flow out quickly. Another word can be burst. Then we've got bounty, so abundance, bountiful, there is a lot, it is overflowing. That then ties into the frothing of the red wine cloaks. So number 5 is frothing, foaming. So the idea that there is an abundance, there are many of them, and a froth is created, foam is created by all of them coming together. And if you think particularly using red wine as a descriptor for the color of the cloaks, then there is, the pouring of the wine, the different processes that does create a foam and a froth. Then we've got number 6, bugled. So a bugle is a brass instrument, and it is used to create certain sounds, particularly on the battlefield. It's usually used by the military, often for funerals and military funerals, because it can have a very deep and somber tone, not very high-pitched. Dirge is funeral song or funeral music, so particularly for a funeral. Then we've got ponder, number 8, that is to contemplate, to think deeply. We have hollow, which is empty. Think of your hollow Easter eggs, things like that. It's empty on the inside. Panoply is a splendid display. It's excessive, it's extreme. If you think pan, many, sort of kind of taking over. If you think about a company that has the monopoly of a sector, or the business students out there, they kind of rule the roost, using another idiom there. Then we've got 11, devours. So that is to eat whole, to swallow whole, to entirely consume. Then we've got number 12, carrion. That is decaying flesh of dead animals. So vultures would look out for carrion, hyenas, animals like that. They're not going to hunt something down like lions and leopards. They eat the leftovers. Then we've got 13, the death's head. So that is skull and crossbones. And then we've got tyranny, which is cruel and oppressive rule. We have scythes. So here it's being used as a verb. So it is to cut out with a scythe, the farming tool, the farming implement. This would be usually used for reaping, for the harvesting. And if you consider that they also include death here, personified, then, death's, we wouldn't call it a weapon. He's not fighting anything, he's just collecting. So you've got that gathering metaphor there. Then we've got 16, which is dearth. So lack of, short supply, scarcity. Generally in terms of a famine. It's usually got to do with resources. There is a big lack in something. All right. There is a lot else going on, but let me go through the dark green and the black colors that I've used. So the black colors and descriptions and the underlining is here to show what is happening at face value. Because don't forget, it does say at a funeral, it is for this particular lady, this young woman. And so there is something happening here in front of us. And you will notice that I'm using the present tense. And please don't forget that if you do the poetry essay, if you answer contextual questions, if you're doing a literature essay, it must be present tense. So yes, it was written in the past, might be something that happened long ago, but you are speaking about it in the now, in the present. So black, green, and gold are graduation colors. So some universities are different, but they can be for a BA, for biology, knowing that this person qualified as a doctor, those colors would come in there. Then you've got expectant. So this idea of those who die, there is an expectation that there will be a resurrection. You can also have the people who expected her to go on to do great things. That's why, again, when it says that the mud devours with our hopes, this particular young lady, everything that was expected of her has now gone. Then we've got bugled. So we've got the idea of the military funeral. We have salute. We are now honoring this person who has passed away. We've got the hollow panoply. So there's this big ceremony, service. You've got all these nurses who are attending. You've got the family. You've got the friends. And in a sense, it does seem to be empty. It seems to be hollow because the person has died. They're not there to see it. This is not like a graduation where all the graduates with the family, with everybody else are there and observing it. It seems hollow. Then we've got the frustrate ones and the powers who are tombed in dirt. So these are the people who have frustrated the government, who are working against the government. They were killed, murdered, died in the process. So those are the people who are already buried. And the poet, the speaker, is referring to them. As you can imagine, he is now at the funeral looking around and seeing all these other graves. Then you've got arise, which is again calling on the people. It could be, standing up. It could be, again, paying respects to the dead. The brassy shout of freedom stirs our earth. Again, this is the expectancy, the resurrection, the second coming that people would be waiting for. And if you notice, there is a lot of the literal surface level, what is actually happening in the first stanza. And by, as the poem continues, there is less and less of that straightforward speaking. There is less of that straightforward speaking. and more the dark green takes over. So let me go through that. Black, green, and gold are also colors of the ANC. So again, this person, if you look them up, they were born in Rhodesia, which would have been Zimbabwe during the time of apartheid. He did have South African parents. He then came back to South Africa. There was quite a lot going on. He tried to speak out against it. Then he was exiled. Then he was sent to prison when he returned. And then he settled eventually in Cape Town. So there was a lot of backwards and forwards in and out and around South Africa during the apartheid time. So this is part of the protest poetry and the colors of the ANC, black, green, and gold. Then you've got expectant, so expecting change, people coming back, trying to make a difference, trying to speak out against what was going on, the oppression, the segregation, the discrimination. You've got bugled, which is calling an army, so it also summoned troops. You've got salute, military personnel, salute. Then you've got the frustrate ones and the powers. So on the one side, you've got the people who were excelling and achieving and becoming successful despite all the opposition and obstacles that the government put in their way. But it can also speak to resistance fighters, freedom fighters, those who were murdered and who died as part of the resistance. And then it becomes a bit more specific. So these frustrate ones, these powers who were working against the government, they were aborted. Now, that is very, very strong imagery. It wasn't manslaughter. It wasn't death by natural causes. This was purposeful. So this was premeditated killing of a human being. And not by death, by the carrion books of birth. And this is the pass book. It's almost this idea that as soon as you were born a person of color, that kind of signaled your death. There was no way around it. That's how they saw it. So the carrion books of birth, and also the idea that it's carrion. You're basically a dead person walking, considering that carrion is the decaying flesh of a dead animal, not a living animal. Then we've got arise. So again, there is this call to arms, grab your weapons and go. The brassy shout of freedom stirs our earth. So the brassy shout, referring to the bugle again, this is now a call to march, to move, to do. It's stirring people to action. Freedom, gonna fight for it. And again, it's not death that scythes our ground, that is laying out the graves, the empty graves that are expectant of people. But it's death's head tyranny. So death's head, you see the hyphen there, it's joining two words together to create a compound, adjectives. So what kind of tyranny? Death's head tyranny. And the government and its oppression and suppression and discrimination is basically cutting out these grooves in the ground. And then I'll come to the our ground later. And plots our narrow cells of pain, defeat, and dearth. So it's almost like the government is aware of what they are doing and the end point for certain people. Plots can also refer to, particular graves. It can mean ground. It can also mean evil planning. And again, the narrow cells can be prison cells, can be the graves themselves of pain, defeat, and dearth. And then ending with better that we should die than that we should lie down. So this is no longer about the funeral and the death of the person. This is now purely die fighting rather than surrendering. Don't give up, don't quit, don't throw in the towel. Rather die fighting than surrender. Okay. All right, couple of other things. Let me go through the personification. The graves are expectant. So they are waiting for the people that are going to be put into them. We've got slopes. So if the hills are moving, it can either be with, the many nurses that are coming down the hill, coming down the slope, but it definitely gives this idea that the earth is moving. And if it's moving, if it's, going in these slopes and these waves, it can also be contributing to the mourning of the people for this lady who has passed away. In a previous video of mine, I did mention that very often nature is called to look upon what is happening, and here we see it again. And then we've got devours, so the mud devours the people with the hopes for that person. So again, personification, the earth is completely consuming people. Death, I've underlined it twice, capital letter, anthropomorphic personification, giving a humanoid body and look to an abstract concept. Can't really touch it. It's not tangible, but it is personified in the actual form of a human. So not just a hand, not just a look, not just a laugh or a shout. It's an actual body. Then I've got in the light blue, sunset, bride's white, nun's white. I've got here the carrion books of birth. I've got the ground. I've got plots. I've got lie down. So there are a number of things symbolized and certain things that are represented with this. So sunset, end of a day, but also end of a life. Then we've got bride's white and nun's white. So not only the color, but also belonging to a bride and a nun. So purity, innocence, newness. Then we've got carrion books of birth. So the books of birth refer to the Dompas, the passbook. We've got plots, which is also a pun. So evil planning or gravesite or a small piece of land. Then we've got our ground. So our ground can be referring to the Group Areas Act. So either the ground that was taken away from the native indigenous people and, was repurposed, or it can refer to the actual laws and legislation putting people into specific areas that, of course, was monitored. But also scythes. So death's tool, a farming tool. We've got the two different ideas there. Some people might say that because death's head tyranny is scything the ground, it's a very violent act, it's very aggressive. There are some texts and some cultures that see death and actually dress death in white rather than black, because it was supposed to protect the soul to the afterlife. It was seen more of a shepherding metaphor instance. So for me personally, I like that idea of it. There are, ways to support that. But given the context of the poem, because this is coming from the government, it is going to be violent and aggressive. It is ill-purposed, okay? And then lastly, we have lie down. So this isn't, the picture of sleep. This isn't a picture of sleep, a picture of death. this is to give up. This is to surrender. Like when somebody is arrested, okay, you know, they lie down. Then I have made pink stars, and I've got 2 light green arrows. So the light green arrows, salute and arise, are commands, exclamation points. The subject is implied. You salute, you arise, they salute, they arise. But it's a command. We call that an imperative. It's an instruction. It's meant to be obeyed. And then the pink stars, that is the tone. So remember, when you are looking for tone words, when you are looking to describe tone, when a question asks you, what is the tone? Explain. You're looking at adverbs, adjectives, imagery, figures of speech, anything that is a description of something or how something was done. So we've got the salute, we've got arise, we've got aborted, we've got death's head tyranny, we've got, you know, better to die than lie down, we've got pain, defeat, dearth, we've got the words devours, expectant, stubbled graves, tombed, carrion. So all of these words and images contribute to tone. So there is a tone of anger, dismay, frustration, disappointment, and determination. So as you can see, there is a lot going on here. And I think if you are going to study this poem like I did for my students in class, I actually did columns. So like a table format with 2 columns, looking at the more surface level, face value, literal. And then on the other side, I looked at the same lines, same words, same images, same phrases, but looking rather at what is underlying, so what is going on underneath. And you will notice that an implied meaning, a deeper meaning, a underlying meaning is found in most protest poetry, where there seems to be layers. So a very surface level, face value layer, and then something deeper. Of course, please remember that also depends on context, historical background, how much you know about the poem. Remember, anything about the poet we don't really want in the answers and the essay topics. The introduction, we don't, really want the background and all of that. But that does inform our understanding of the poem. We do also have the themes, so the criticizing of oppression, the call to arms, frustrated, aborted hopes, and that can be seen in the different parts of the poem. So the negative words used to talk about the government and oppression, arise, salute, stirring our earth, brassy shout of freedom, bugling, being the call to arms, and then of course the gifts that the mud devours with our hopes, this hollow panoply, those are the frustrated and aborted hopes. And that is that.